This government meeting is brought to you by Eastworks and our local cable subscribers.
Okay. Greetings, everyone, and welcome to the December 20th, 2022 EDIC meeting. We are a full complement of EDIC members today. I'm delighted about that. Also, we still need 2 members. Tell your friends, tell everybody. We want 2 more people. Hooray, hooray. So, has everyone had a chance to review the meeting minutes that I pulled together for November? No.
Yes, they look great.
Do they? Because what I just realized is that Cassie was not at that meeting.
That is correct.
Yeah. So I have her listed as present. She was actually absent, so I got to change that. If we make that change, we got a motion to approve.
So motioned.
Second.
Outstanding. And Cassie, you're doing minutes today?
I am.
I so appreciate that about you. Okay. Any further discussion of the November meeting minutes? We will make the change that Cassie was not in attendance in November, and I will submit that edited version. All right. All in favor, holler aye.
Aye.
Do they need to be seconded?
It was seconded by Tom and Mo simultaneously.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
I think I beat her.
Okay.
So noted.
It's just a little quicker.
Yeah. We got second, thirded, fourthed. Okay. I will note that we included in our minutes from last time that we had little tasks for several of us. I did not do mine. I will, but I did not do the thing I said I would do.
I appreciate that, Gwen, because I also did not do mine, but I will.
I believe you. And we had David Kutcher on deck to write to ISO New England. And
I wrote to, yep.
Yeah.
I wrote to ISO New England. I got our marketing team will get back to you soon.
Cool. Really good. Thank you. All right. So November meeting minutes dealt with. Do I want to save this? I sure do. Okay. Public speak. We have Chaim Jamrock McQuaid here, but he is on our agenda for later. Chaim, if there's something that you would like to bring up that's not on the agenda, now is your chance. Cool. He's all good. All right. So next up, I would love to offer you updates from the planning department. Jeff Bagg cannot be here. He has a sick child. So what I will share is that he said he has very few updates as regards planning department. All he brought up was that it is important, as we will get into momentarily, that EDIC presents some kind of support for the Sierra Vista development proposal for the Tasty Top site. He pointed out that it'll bring in new tax revenue. It represents commercial growth in a relatively long vacant property. And it definitely helps us move toward our housing production goal in our formal housing production plan. So if we have any questions we'd like to pose for Jeff to bring the answers to in January, let me know them now, and we can prompt him. Otherwise, we haven't got much. David.
So I've got a bunch. Will there be a traffic study? Because if they're planning on doing the routes thing that I talked about, been to routes when there are events. The one in Westfield, traffic is a huge issue.
Yep. Traffic's definitely going to come up as part of this. A traffic study will definitely feature in it.
Second is we're talking about ISO New England with the gas pipeline.
Yep.
Are they how are they doing this? Or purely renewables?
Say that again. You cut out a bit.
Are they doing it purely solar electric?
Yeah.
Seems like a big building to doing that way.
It's a really great question. Yeah. What do we know about energy sources for that development?
And the third is that's going to be the only real residential, if they're trying to do mixed use, that's going to be on this entire strip. It's such a weird area to do residential there. I mean, I think you're talking about. I mean, yeah, I guess. I mean, like, it's a very. I'm going to say like Route 9 through Hadley kind of experience that this is turning into on the strip.
Mm.
You know, it's kind of a weird place for a residential as well.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I can imagine the bus stop in the morning being a shit show.
Mm.
Excuse my language.
I'll take that. I've noted that.
Yep. Thank you.
Demerit. Chris Korchik.
Yeah, and all the, can you guys hear me all right?
Yeah, you're a little quiet, but I'll turn up my volume.
Yeah, I got a crummy mic on this computer. In all the Gazette articles and planning documents I saw, I didn't see anything about a pool or soccer. Is that still on the docket for them eventually?
Oh no. We got a public hearing at the planning board tonight, starting at 6 p.m. So if you're interested and you've got questions, I'm sure there will be an element of education about that. Tom Brown.
So Gwen, I had the opportunity to attend a meeting, as you know, earlier this month with the developers.
Yep.
They were just trying to pick my brain about some historical stuff at the site.
Yep.
And I think some of this stuff might be answered in the map that was sent to you, but the answer to Chris's question is no. And Dave, I know the popularity of Roots in Westfield, it's huge. You know, indoor soccer, swimming, gymnastics, the whole 9 yards. In Easthampton, the plan is only for learning center, which is a nice phrase for daycare, and gymnastics. Those are the two buildings going up, sort of behind where Starbucks is going up. One is I don't know which is which, but one is a 7,000 square foot building and one is a 9,000 square foot building. Again, daycare, gymnastics, that's the only Roots function that's going up in Easthampton. And I'm 94% sure that they've already commissioned a traffic study because they know that's going to be the big elephant in the room is traffic. But we all know without traffic, you don't have business. And the last thing I'll mention is on the residential. I don't know where the line is, but the front of this property is zoned neighborhood business, I believe, and the back is zoned residential. And these guys are smart enough to keep those lines separated. That's why the residential units are in the back and the commercial is up front. So I believe that they avoid the zoning board because they're not going for a zone change. They're putting the appropriate development within the appropriate zones. Stop and Shop and the cannabis growing operation both hit a brick wall because they needed a zone change, because they were ignoring where the zoning lines were and just putting their building where they wanted to put it. So they needed zoning change. These guys, to the best of my knowledge, all they need is planning board approval.
Yeah. Which is not to say that approval will be easily granted and willing and quick. But yes, that is from the perspective of how they make it happen. Yes.
Correct.
David.
I'm sorry, I just need for the minutes. Tom, did you say there will not be a pool and a soccer field?
Correct. Correct.
I thought I saw one on the map, but
It should say, I thought the map said Roots Learning Center and Roots Gymnastics.
back in the housing area, it looked like there was a pool. But I probably read the map wrong.
Not to my knowledge, unless that's changed, Cassie.
Yeah.
I was just thinking,
Sorry, Dave.
with Roots, it's when you measure the traffic study as a per, cars per hour kind of deal, just it's more like 100 cars leaving within a 5-minute span at the top of the hour.
Mm.
You know, and then doing that repeatedly, because it's going to be 50, 100 cars, maybe more, all within the schedule. But they've got to have that number of families in order to make it a sustainable business. And then they always leave like literally within a 5 or 10 minute, you know, span. So it's kind of a crush and then nothing. So it's, you know, as everyone knows from Route 9 driving, Route 10 driving, especially during this construction, you know, this road does not handle crushes that well.
No. I'm looking at the map right now. Cassie's right. I see a pool on here.
Oh, I'm not crazy.
You're not. There's nobody thought you were crazy. Let's just start there.
Share the link to the map. But don't worry about it. Don't worry about it.
I can forward it. Can I forward it, Tom?
Yeah, it's a public document.
Okay.
I mean, these guys have shared it with the planning department.
So when I send it to you, it's in the upper left, the northwest side of the plan in a residential, in the center of a residential setup. So there's a community garden and then a pool and then a playground.
So that pool, Gwen, to my knowledge, then would be an amenity for the apartments. It would not be a public pool.
Right.
Right.
It's not going to generate traffic other than the residents. I mean, you and I couldn't drive in there to use the pool. Let's put it that way.
Right. Very good. Got it. Okay.
Not legally anyway.
Yeah, right. Chris, after dark would be okay.
Oh boy.
But to Dave's concerns, if there's no soccer, there's probably no traffic. You know, no, seriously. I mean, that's what the Roots traffic is. It's all soccer, and if we're not doing that here, there's not going to be much difference. I mean, there'll be some traffic, but not that crush that we both know well. You know.
Well, I think that it's certainly something that can be brought to the public hearings, and people can be invited to contemplate that. I take your point, Dave, about Route 9 in Hadley and Route 10 in Easthampton becoming like driving Route 9 is like my worst nightmare. So, do you have other stuff that you'd want to add? Okay. Where am I? Where is my mouse? So, we talked about some of that on the topic, technically in our little planning department section, because that was brought up by Jeff. We can get into more specifics about that. So actually, why don't we lead with that? What I do want to do is be done with our proposed letter of support for this development and update on vacant storefront ordinance. I want to be done with that by 4:35. So we have about 20 minutes so that we have 10 minutes minimum for a presentation from Paul St. Pierre, who is in a class where he is studying stuff about housing. And that is as articulate as I can be about that. And I would also like to share that Kayam is here because he represents the Easthampton Housing Coalition. He's done an excellent job coordinating people, getting people to show up to meetings to the extent that it is possible to wrangle cats. And local public policy planning. You're a master's student at UMass. Is that right? Okay. So he's here because Sierra Vista as a proposal has a lot to do with affordable housing, development of housing stock in the first place. And I think it's important that as EDIC continues thinking about ways that we can publicly support sustainable housing creation and thoughtful policies around that, let's have a relationship with the Easthampton Housing Coalition, which is not a municipal committee. It's a group of people who are interested in housing and care about thinking creatively about that. So that's why Kayam is here. Paul.
Yeah, does anyone what does it actually mean by sustainable housing?
Dude, I'm just throwing out words, man. I'm not a master's student. I'm saying sustainable to the extent that we're not only building housing to the exclusion of maintaining green spaces. So like we've got a plan that allows us to exist as a city while still having things like trees.
Sorry, I didn't mean to put you in the spot, Glenn. I've
that's
heard
okay.
that phrase before. I just never knew what it meant.
It probably means something else to people who have a degree.
Sustainable housing.
I mean,
My housing is sustained.
a sustainable house is probably different from sustainable housing. And also, I'm a layperson in this world, so
Okay.
I don't know. We'll ask Kyle. Kyle, that's your first task. When you talk next, please address Paul's question, Pierre's question. Pierre St. Pierre. Okay. So I sent you in my compendium of things to look at a draft letter of support for the Sierra Vista development on Route 10. What I intentionally did with that letter, we can decide that we don't want to say anything as the EDIC tonight, but my thinking was bring this draft to you. And if you don't have major issues with it and you can get behind it representing how EDIC feels, I can read it at the public hearing tonight because it's in an hour and 43 minutes. If you do have issues with it and we can't get on board with it as a group, I will go and talk as Gwyn, who happens to be on EDIC, but this does not represent EDIC. What I also did is I made it quite short. I did not get into a lot of details, except that it does make an effort to address our housing production needs. It includes affordable housing as part of its plan, and it diversifies some of the options available to our community. And I also said that, what did I say? Things we understand could be problematic about it. It poses certain challenges to make it go. And I also pointed out that there is confusion about what counts as affordable housing. That's not a word that has meaning to the average public person as it does. It doesn't have the same meaning to like a state legislator. And I specifically wrote in that we are advocates for sustainable development, responsible housing policies, and we want to support efforts to respond to and mitigate those concerns. And I also think I said we strongly support the preliminary proposal. So it doesn't say, no matter what they do, we love it. It just says, in general, at first blush, this seems like a good idea. So I invite you to push back on any parts of this. Tell me if you feel like you can get behind this letter as it stands, or whether I should go and represent just my own views.
I think it's a nice letter, Gwen.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. Tom Brown.
I agree with Paul. I think the letter's well constructed. I like the fact that you I like the fact that you put in the issues that could crop up, and hopefully they work through those, like traffic. We're not sticking our heads in the sand and ignoring the fact that there could be issues. I don't know how we, as an Economic Development Commission, at least preliminarily, I don't know how we could not support this project after all the talking we've done about housing. And we committed, I believe, when we turned the calendar a year ago, that we would have to start showing up at these types of meetings to sort of offset the negative, just to the point of the fact that we support it as a group or as an individual.
Yeah, I agree with that. David.
I have a small wording request change of it, instead of preliminary, which for some audiences might be a long word, changing it to the initial plan as shown or something along those lines.
Okay.
Especially as these plans tend to morph, preliminary becomes kind of a muddy word.
Can you say that again? It becomes a money word?
A muddy word.
Oh, a muddy word. That makes more sense than money word. That's good. I'm glad you said money.
So it becomes a, well, you know, these guys were behind the preliminary. Well, what's the preliminary?
Right.
So like, you know, I mean, I would say first draft, but you know, the initial plan.
Yep. Okay. So if I change that to strongly supports the initial plan for the Sierra Vista Commons development on Route 10, that would meet your point.
Yeah. And I know that feels like it's nitpicky, but it's
I believe
For
in
some reason, reading the Facebook group comments on things like that, preliminary becomes very weird.
It's a very good point. Very attuned to our colleagues out in the world. Paul.
Well, I was just going to ask if anyone knew, are there people who are like already against this, or who are presuming are trying to want to shut this down?
Yeah, I mean, there are people who are just annoyed at the idea of why should we have more housing in Easthampton? There are people who are annoyed about the idea of, well, but I loved Tasty Top. There are people who are confused about how you could possibly get away with calling the numbers that were printed in the Gazette article affordable when they were probably erroneously or unintentionally characterized as affordable, while definitely not being what would even count as affordable rates. So there's a lot of there are a lot of unique and interesting intellectual and emotional reasons for people to push back on this.
And then
Does
you got to
anybody
throw in the, well, they're destroying open space, and then there's all kinds of there's all kinds of pushback.
Right, Tom.
And Paul, I think some of this is just looking at historically what's happened on this site. No matter what goes in there, and I'm not saying this with any disrespect, the immediate neighborhoods, I believe they want nothing to go there. They want it to stay as it is. And so they're going to latch on to something to argue against the project. And I believe that their initial latch on is going to be traffic. I mean, if you or I lived on Northampton Street, we might not like the traffic backed up in front of our house. But when my daughter purchased a house close to a huge open lot, I said, if this ever gets developed, keep your mouth shut, because it's open. If you don't want it developed, buy it.
Yeah. Yep. Other thoughts about that, Paul, in response? Does that, should we think about that in what we write in our letter, do you think?
I mean, out of the concerns that I think that just kind of went around, I do understand traffic could be a concern with that quantity of housing on that street, and the housing traffic study will inform a lot of that. I think that you do cover that though in your letter, saying that you want to see or support efforts to respond to and mitigate those concerns.
Yeah. Okay. I think it leaves it open for us to be thoughtful with the city and to be public facing as well, to help whatever entities need to be part of a campaign to inform people, and also like completely open to the idea that something changes about the plan that we're like, you know what, actually, no thanks, not for us.
I do feel that a lot of times in these kinds of projects, there's a lot of people who might be against them before they happen, but then once it's built, 5-10 years later, everybody's happy it's there.
Yeah. Mo, I haven't heard from you. Is there anything that you would want to throw out there currently?
No, not that hasn't already been said. I think it's well crafted.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So we're comfortable with this. I've made the change. So it says initial, too many spaces, plan, delete an extra space. Very good. So I can bring that. I will read it aloud tonight, and I will send it to whatever their names are, Mr., all 5 men. Chaim, do you have anything that you would suggest for this letter?
No, I think it's well crafted, and I think it addresses. I like that it addresses the potential pushback. I think there's definitely it's important to open up that conversation on our terms, I think, or at least on the terms of like people who will provide data like through a traffic study and that kind of stuff. I think we want to give the opportunity for those questions to be answered before a lot of hyperbole gets thrown around. Yeah. And yeah, I mean, I prepared a very similar statement that's just like, this will be a good thing for Easthampton, mainly because we need housing at all levels. And like, I made sure to include the fact that Easthampton is shrinking. Like, we're not at risk of growing beyond our means at this point. If anything, we have a sustainability problem with our tax base eroding if we don't do anything, like if we don't make these productive investments now. So, so yeah, I think your letter definitely touches on all that.
All right, so together we're covering some useful bases. That's good. Tom, you have something else? Just
real quick. When we talk about traffic, I think some folks believe that they're going to wake up one morning and all of a sudden there's all these, the gymnastics and the daycare and the other buildings and 200 apartments. This is a long-term project. Yeah. I've heard anywhere from 5 to 10 years. So if this is incrementally developed, by the time it's done, you might not even notice that it happened. Yeah. Along, I don't remember if Paul or Chris said that, but so if year one the daycare goes up and year two, 25 apartments go up, yes, you incrementally begin to increase the traffic, but you don't get the full impact of this. And when you spread that out over 5 or 10 years, it's, I don't want to say you don't notice it, but you don't notice it as much. Yeah. And who knows what could change about access to the PIVTA on a regular basis? What if the PVTA was coming every 15 minutes? Oh my gosh, what a dream. It could change cars on those roads forever. Exactly. Who knows what's going to happen? Okay, so I feel comfortable about this letter. Do we need to vote on it? That feels like a no, but I don't know. Anybody have a strong feeling about that? I'd love to for the minutes. Oh, wonderful. Gosh, great. All right. Do we have a motion to vote on this letter of support? I'd make a motion that we approve the letter of support to be read by Gwen at tonight's planning board meeting as written with the change that they've recommended. Great. We have a second from Mo. Okay. All in favor? All right. Aye. Outstanding. Okay, great. We've done that. Next up, vacant storefront ordinance progress. You guys. Guess what? They have finalized language. Cassie and I were there at the meeting where they were like, we get it now. We've got some ideas. Let's put this all together. It was cool. So Omar was also there, city council president. And what they are now at as of December 12th, the wording will be sent to the full council pending attorney review. So I guess that means it's actually going to the attorney first and then to city council. Because what they didn't want to do was have it get sent to city council while it was still in the attorney's hands and have city council make a lot of changes that then they have to resend to the attorney. So that's delightful. I'm very pleased. Cool. So that's your update. Any comments or questions about that? No? All right. What an exciting time to be part of the EDIC. I'll tell you what. All right. So now I have this vague agenda item of discuss housing, especially affordable, with Kym in the room and with data support from Paul. So my inclination rather now, I think I want to lead with Paul because I think that may be a jumping off point, Kym, for the rest of our discussion. Is that cool with the two of you? All right. So Paul, you've got 5 extra minutes. So we're starting.
That's great. That's great. Can I share my screen?
I don't know. Do you need privileges for that?
I have a feeling, right? Because it says I'm not allowed to share my screen.
Well, let's find out if I can help you. Oh, cancel. I got to make you a co-host probably, huh? Add as co-host.
Hey, okay. I know I can do it. That's
right.
Great. All right, thanks. So just a background, I'm working on this report. I don't know if you all know this, but I'm a college student yet again. And I'm working on a report that's looking at national and statewide demographic shifts, and then looking at our own city and seeing how those shifts are being reflected in our local market and what kind of conclusions we can draw from them. Now, this is definitely a draft. Just keep that in mind. So let's see if I can share PowerPoint with you all. or just share my whole screen. Chrome wants to, yeah, share the whole thing. Okay. Can everybody see this?
Yep.
Yes.
Looks good.
Okay, great. I'm going to try and keep this brief, but I don't know how long it'll be. There's a lot here. I'm going to speak pretty quickly and just try to save any questions or feedback for after the end. Okay. So to start with, nationally, we are seeing a huge increase in the number of Americans 65 and older. This is primarily being driven by boomers, but not just because there's so many of them, but also because the life expectancy is far longer now than it used to be. Back in 1940, the expectancy for the newborn male was 58 years. It's a lot longer now. This is leading to a huge increase in the amount of household growth for members of older households. In Massachusetts, according to CHAPA, we have a larger proportion of boomers than the rest of the country. This kind of shows, you can see the light blue, gray, those are baby boomers, 1960 and 1980. In 2000, we have Easthampton data that I was able to find. The charts aren't exactly the same because there are so many more categories in the Massachusetts chart and the Easthampton one, but you can kind of see how we're kind of following this kind of Coke bottle. And then looking at 2020, you see how the population, I'm going to go back. The population triangle, you can see in 1960, which has really been the case for like all history, has become a population rectangle. This is so impactful that the census predicts by 2034, people aged 65 and older will outnumber children that's 18 and under for the first time in history. In Easthampton, it has already happened.
Wow.
Yeah, I know, right? In Easthampton, we have seen a steady increase in the number of 65 and older, and that is correlated with an increase in the amount of 65 and older living alone. This is, according to the DHCD, Department of Housing and Community Development, something that we should be monitoring because these seniors face particularly special challenges. Now, what would these challenges be? Disability would be one of them. As we age, we become increasingly disabled. This is driven by mobility impairments. Certainly, this is driven by dementia. Also results in an increased proportion of the population that does not drive. This is particularly dangerous for those who live alone, who can become isolated. Another thing that affects us as we get older is, well, we become poorer. Our poverty increases. This is a little bit old data, but it shows that of extremely low and very low income homeowners in Massachusetts, 60% are elderly, and a high proportion of renters as well are elderly. And that's a little older. I imagine that's gone up as our proportion of elderly has increased. I found this data was very interesting, and I could find back up with Easthampton, but the Department of Housing and Community Development states that homeowners with no mortgage debt, which are typically seniors, experience the steepest increase in cost burden relative to their earnings as their taxes, utilities, and their insurance goes up. In Easthampton, over the last, 10 years of data I could find, we've gone from 80 to 220 cost burden households without mortgages. Cost burden, that means they're spending 30% or more of their monthly income toward their housing expenses. And their property taxes have gone up. This is just among homeowners who do not have a mortgage. Their property taxes have gone up about $125 a month. As we age, this is harmful or dangerous because as we age, we make less money. Our median household income drops across all demographic groups the older that we get. In Easthampton, our median household income has fallen compared to the rest of the state and the county quite drastically over the 2010 decade. And as you might imagine, our age has also increased disproportionately compared to Hampshire County. And also the state, but I didn't put the state on there.
Paul, do we think that that's causal, or it just happens to be related?
Well, they're correlated because as we age, we make less money.
Sure.
And so as our community has made less money, we also see that our community has aged disproportionately. So this means that it's at least it indicates or implies that the older population is contributing to our reduced median income.
Yeah. Okay.
Is also another thing that happens as we age is that our children start to disappear. Even though we've seen 26% household growth since 1990, we have minus 28% school enrollment. Now, this is consistent with studies that have looked across the entire state. The Metropolitan Area Planning Council did a study of 234 school districts. That study included the city of Easthampton, found that housing growth in no way indicates growth of school enrollment. As our school population or enrollment has declined, so has our spending on the school. Now, keep in mind, this spending, the net school spending, does not include spending on construction or long-term debt. So it doesn't include the new schools. It also does not include the cost of transportation or crossing guards. It's just direct money that's spent on the education of our students. To look at the data more, breaking it down, you see that our cost per student has gone from $11,000 to $16,500 since 2008. That's as old as I could get data for that reflected the net school spending. Now, as our pupil costs go up, part of the reason is because many of our school expenditures are inelastic. It doesn't really matter how many kids we have. And according to the Planning Council, this will result in less return on investment for capital improvements like newly constructed schools, which we have a couple of those. So we would like to get some more kids, right, and get a better return on that investment. As you can see, over this 13-year period, we've lost 234 kids. We employ 20 fewer teachers, and we're spending $5 million more on the education. We're also spending another $6 million a year on top of that for the new schools, and $1.1 million for the cost of transportation. Altogether, in 2021, we spent more than $30 million, 68% of our entire municipal budget on our schools. Okay, if we want to increase kids, we have to think, where can they live? Well, 70% of all of our owner-occupied units have 3 or more bedrooms. The vast majority of units that can create children or house school-age children are 3 bedrooms or more, and they tend to be single-family homes. According to our friend Judy Barrett in 2003, it is a little old, but she did write that in most multifamily developments, they do not have or house school-age children. Even those with 3-bedroom units have so few that the average number of children per unit is well below that of a single-family home. So one thing that we see, I know there's not a good chart, there probably isn't a good slide, but all of these different sources agree. The only way that communities see increases in population, and especially in school-age population, is generational turnover of their existing housing stock. This is especially because, and this is in Massachusetts, or actually no, this is national-wide, but 57% of the homes that are purchased by older sellers are under 45 buyers. So as homes turn over to the new generation, there's and it's also a more diverse generation, communities see increased diversity, and they bring new families in and they reinvigorate their communities. However, communities that do not have this generational turnover, boomers will choose to age in place. The communities will see fewer new households, continued declines in enrollment. So one of the things that communities do to try and stimulate turnover of their housing stock is to invest in 55 and over or other types of senior housing. In Easthampton, we did this in the early or mid 2000s. After 2008, we stopped. The city council voted to eliminate the ordinance that allowed these to move forward because they had received 7 proposals for age-restricted housing in 5 years. Since then, we've received 0. If 7 was too many, 0 is probably too few because it's been 14 years. And that's part of the housing stock that we should create. So these units, when we created them, I believe overall, they had some success. Well, let me look at this again. I will tell you, Mount Thomas Estates was a nightmare. It had a bunch of issues. It was auctioned off after building like less than half the units, and then eventually it was finished. So those 22 did not come in 2003, but like over the course of like 10 years. But these other ones went pretty well, and Treehouse is a particular gem in our, or feather in our cap, I would say. After we built these 55 plus developments, some of the impacts that we saw in our own community, we saw, if you look at the red line, that's our average household size. It had been declining, it tapered off, and then eventually it resumed its decline. And I don't know if these are causal of the 55 developments, but they certainly indicate that they had some success on the demographic shifts in our community. Our single person households, that's the orange line. I know it doesn't look like it was a super steep incline, but pre-2000, it was really low and it went way up. But I just can't, I'm not going to show like 30, 40 years in this because the charts don't look good. But certainly that tapered off. And our school enrollment actually had quite a surge after we built these 55 plus homes, leading the school, who's in charge? The school superintendent to say in 2013 that they expected that our enrollment would continue to increase for the foreseeable future. Of course, I really liked that Intendant Nancy. I forget her last name, but she was great, but she wasn't right about that because our enrollment has continued to decline. And I also noticed, I'm going to go back a little bit. I don't know if this is correlated, but the 65 plus households also tapered off in that period before increasing. This is single person households. I don't know what if that's related or not, but I just thought it was interesting. Okay, where am I? I'm here. So these are the conclusions I've come to. And again, this is a draft. I really just pumped these out last night. First conclusion, the demographic shift is real. It's here to stay. The increase of residents over 60 has exerted tremendous influence on our market. It will continue to do so. Seniors are not going anywhere. We're only living longer. The housing market we have now is deeply unhealthy. The lack of available housing options, it has suppressed the generational turnover of homes. Market gentrification has pushed out low-income residents. It creates a slow drip of available units. This slow drip, it creates like a feeding frenzy in the market. Buyers from a higher socioeconomic status are the only ones who are able to afford them. It pushes up the housing prices, and it creates or reinforces observed patterns of educational segregation. We can talk more about what that means outside of the 10 minutes I got. My third conclusion, Easthampton is dying, not growing. I know we like to say, oh, if you're not growing, you're dying. Well, I think we're dying. Multifamily housing developments have shown no effectiveness at all in making Easthampton more affordable, more accessible, or in growing our population. In fact, low and medium income families are increasingly shut out of the market over the last decade, despite creating hundreds of new subsidized and market rate apartments. If you go back 25 years, we've created more than 370 subsidized units, but we are less and less affordable every year. My fourth conclusion, the market will not just fix itself. We must be proactive about organizing our community so that we can meet the needs of the future. We don't even worry about today, worry about tomorrow, because that's all we can change. If we continue the current trajectory, we'll see continued declines in single-person households, increases in single-person households, continued declines in school enrollment, our median incomes will remain low. Easthampton will die slowly on the vine. We need new young families. And the way we get there, I believe, this is at least my conclusion, and again, this is a draft, senior housing is our greatest unmet need. Our population there is exploding. Seniors overwhelmingly prefer to remain in the same community. Seniors will not sell and move to other communities unless they absolutely have to. This helps us in both ways. One, when we create senior housing, a lot of our seniors who live there come from Easthampton. And it also helps us because fewer people from outside of Easthampton want to come here. They want to stay where they are too. So the more effective we are in creating accessible, attractive, available housing options for seniors, and in particular, I didn't write this here, but this is going to involve tying housing to services that seniors need. But the more effectively we can do that, the more turnover we will see in our detached single-family homes that are the great majority of housing that we have in Easthampton that's even capable of housing school-age families. Because I was good on time, actually I wasn't that good. I had 12, but Gwen said I had 15. I'm going to give you a bonus slide. We talked last time about the subsidized housing inventory. As I was doing this research, I found some other things, other complaints that I have, and I want to just raise about this metric. Okay, the goal, I believe it's outdated and it's unrealistic. That goal has been in place since 1969. In 50 years, only 22% of the municipalities have been able to reach it. In the Pioneer Valley, only 12%, 12.5%, only 6 total municipalities have been able to reach that goal. It's been 50 years. Why could that be? Well, because inventory is constantly aging out of the system. After a certain amount of time, our subsidized units don't even count anymore. In 2005, we were at 7.3%. We had 500 units on the inventory. In 2014, that's from our housing production plan, we were down like 40-something units. We were down to 6%. In 2018, we built 122 units and lost 46. In 2021, we lost another 11. And over the next 10 years, we will lose an additional 103 units from our subsidized housing inventory count. That's nearly 20% of our total right now. So my third reason that I don't think that the subsidized housing inventory number is actually important is that it does not measure affordability within a community. This only measures the properties which have gone through a very bureaucratic and regulated process. The properties have to be originated from a government agency. They have to be regulated and constantly monitored, and the people who live there have to be approved by government agencies. You go through all these steps, you get a little sticker basically on the file of that unit. It counts toward our subsidized housing inventory for a certain amount of time. Some of them, I don't know what the difference is. Some of them never expire, but some of them do. So for whatever reason that is. But anyway, that metric is not intended. It's often confused to be measuring the affordability of a community, but it's not intended to, and it does not measure that. And my last thing is that there's actually no benefit to us, even if we were at 10%, because the only thing that changes is we could deny housing developments for low-income people from coming to Easthampton, but I can't think of one single housing development that we have that I would say, well, man, I wish we could have just shut that down. You know, we want that. So it doesn't make sense that there's some benefit to us. Frankly, if we didn't lose those 46 units and then the other units that we lost between 2005 and actually from 1997 over the last 25 years, we've lost like a whole bunch of units. I forget what it is. But if they weren't expiring from our inventory, we'd be at like 8.2% inventory minimum. Right now we're at 7, but that fluctuates. And if we take out 103, we're going to be at like, 4 or 5% subsidized housing inventory. So it just feels like we're trying to keep blowing air into a tire that has a hole in it, and we're never going to get there. So why is this so important to us? Anyways, that's my point. That's the end of my presentation right now. 15 minutes, 13 seconds on the dot.
Wow, it's a lot of information. You put a lot of energy into that. There's a lot of, it sounds trite, but I'm going to call it passion in your delivery. And now I'm very, very stressed. Chris.
I know.
What do you got, Chris?
I thought that was great. Would you be willing to share that presentation with us, or is that?
You mean like send you the PowerPoint file?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah, totally. And I put all the citations of all the data because trust me, that data is accurate. But if you want to check for yourself, you certainly feel free to, But yeah.
So one of the things that there was this housing study countywide, I think it was countywide, it could be regional. And it turned out that we needed over 1,000 units just to meet the demand of what we had coming into Easthampton. That's just Easthampton. And you're right. There's no way we can reach that demand. We have a big problem, and I don't know what the solution is. That's all.
David.
So if we're looking at single family homes with 3 bedrooms that are within the range of affordability, right now on MLS, there are 4. There are 4 single family homes with 3 bedrooms that are under $350,000. And I don't even know if 350 would count as affordable. It was just an arbitrary number, but we only have 4 available properties in Easthampton that match that.
Yeah, and I imagine that what Tom will be tapping into with his next comment, which I will allow him to make shortly, is this is a problem that we have known about for several years now. We are just watching it continue to play out. Tom Brown.
Yeah, just one other unique piece is that when people look at the population of Easthampton, if you go back, I don't know how many years, the population of Easthampton was 16,000 people. If you look at it today, it's 16,000 people. People think that these developments just keep making the city grow and grow. I'll give you just one quick example. So my wife and I have 5 children. So for 20 years, there were 7 of us living under one roof. So we added to the population of Easthampton by 7. 4 of my children are now living in housing units in Easthampton. So the population didn't change. One of our children moved to another town, Renegade. The population of Easthampton, as it relates to my family, actually decreased. So 4 of them are living in a home or an apartment in Easthampton that did not change the population at all. And that's not unique to my family. There's dozens of us, hundreds of us, thousands of us maybe, that branch out, are looking for housing, looking for affordable housing, but never change the total population number of Easthampton. And I want to second Chris's. Paul, if you could send that PowerPoint to all of us, that would be great.
Yeah, having that sort of thing available is useful just when you're in casual conversation, as well as to inform future discussions here. Mo, did I hear you want to say something?
No, I had to go get my power cord. I
do want to give Chaim a chance to weigh in, so I'll give it to David briefly.
I'm just saying my phone is about to die, so I unfortunately will need to jump off.
Okay. Goodbye. Thanks, David.
Take care, Al. Thank you.
Yeah. Chaim, I'm not going to ask you to respond with the answers to these plights that Paul has just underlined so forcefully for us, but I am interested in hearing the way that you, as young person coordinating volunteer coalition out in our community, might look at what you've seen about how EDIC operates and thinks allowed together, and what you imagine the coalition might want to do with that fact with us. in response to some of what Paul had to say too.
Sure, yeah. Well, just to start, in response to that presentation, I thought that was really well put together, particularly around the population data and the demographic changes for Easthampton and what that means. I would say that there were a couple things, important things that are missing, and that is, I think it would be interesting to interrogate the interplay between the housing, the financial crisis in 2007 and 2008, and how that affected the development of housing, especially age-restricted housing. Because I know that, like, the way you framed it made it sound like it was very much just an ordinance change, a policy change from city council. But I think that there might be other market dynamics that were at play there. Also, the one thing I would push back on is the idea that our subsidized housing inventory isn't something that is worth pursuing. And I think the dynamic that's missing from the slide that you included was that those housing units that are aging out from our subsidized housing inventory are actually, they're not becoming income restricted anymore. So when we're talking about subsidized housing inventory, we're talking about units that are restricted to be affordable to only 30% of someone's income who is making a certain percentage of the local area median income, usually between 60 and 80% for low income. And then extremely low income would be below that, but I could be wrong with the exact numbers. So it is a problem that there's a hole in the tire. I agree with you that we need to keep these permanently affordable units permanently affordable, or the affordable units permanently affordable. But I don't think that that should be an impetus to, like, not pursue new affordable housing units, because it is something that we see a really strong demand for in Easthampton. Like, there are studies done on, like, the affordability gap and, like, the amount of people that need housing that is income restricted to 30% but don't get it. And when you look at the AMI numbers, like, I think you have to, for a single person, you have to be making over $48,000 or $50,000 a year to qualify as above 80% area median income. So, like, you know, that's a lot of people in Easthampton. Like, the need is there. So that's just all I have to say about that. In regards to Easthampton Housing Coalition and the EDIC, I think that there are a lot of exciting opportunities for collaboration, because I think, as you guys have identified, housing is a really important part of the economic dynamics of a city. So, you know, I had brought this up with Gwyn earlier, if as an idea of maybe doing some sort of publication or opinion piece on that fact, and how we can outline how building housing is actually good for the small businesses in Easthampton, how, like, building housing over a parking lot is a good idea, or that kind of thing. But those are just my thoughts, and yeah, I don't want to ramble too much, but.
Well, thank you for that. Cassie, what do you got?
Sorry, the dogs are hungry. We need over 65 housing, yes, complicated by the healthcare needs of those over 65, you know, needing. It would be great if we could attract a continuing care retirement community. Those have staffing needs, though, and everybody's experiencing staffing shortages. And you can't get a primary care doc in the valley. So that's all. Yeah,
it's a real confluence of some really, I don't want to reduce it to something that sounds simplistic by calling it a sticky wicket, but the gum in the works is just everywhere. Paul.
Yeah, I just want to say, first of all, I definitely agree with Cassie. And, is my microphone on? Yeah, okay. Definitely agree with Cassie. My point in this is not necessarily we need these active living 55 plus, but we need to actively be thinking about how this demographic shift is here to stay. And with this increase in numbers of people, especially as they have these disabilities, as we have people with dementia, as we get this population that's boomers now, but will be moving into their 80 plus years, what kind of facilities do we have and what kind of medical care are we providing for these people? Do we have any options at all? I mean, right now we have a few, but they're very few in Easthampton. And just that we need to be conscious that that's a need for us, and we need to develop that eventually, because by the time I'm old enough, hopefully we have something. Chaim, I just want to say, affordable housing is extremely important to me, but I do not believe that is the same as subsidized housing inventory. The subsidized housing inventory does not measure and is not intended to measure affordable housing. Now, while subsidized inventory housing is affordable, affordable housing is not necessarily subsidized. Affordable housing is housing that's priced at within, like you said, a certain percentage of what is considered affordable based on the area median income. The only other thing I want to point out about that is that area median income is based in our county. And Easthampton has, I think it's the lowest area median income in the entire county. So actually affordability is more of a struggle than even it would just look for Easthampton if you look at the data like that. And the other thing about the thing that happened in 2008, there was a housing crisis, of course, in 2008, but specifically what that was talking about, we had an ordinance that was passed that allowed for different housing densities, for different types of housing developments for people with disabilities and for people that are older than 55, because of different needs. Not everybody drives a car. You have smaller units, single floor living, not as many bedrooms, that kind of stuff. So they were able to build more units within a certain density, and they got rid of that ordinance. So essentially it goes back to the standard, which is like our normal, like residential neighborhood type density, which is really high. And it doesn't allow them to create these kind of 55 plus communities that were very popular in Massachusetts over that period of time. That's all I got.
Okay. So this is not ever going to be a super straightforward linear conversation, is it?
No. And one other thing too, I want to say is my point is not to say that any other housing is not important.
Oh yeah.
Not at all. It's just that senior housing needs to be a part of what we're doing.
Yep. And that's something that EDIC has talked about for literal years.
I know, and I wish Jeff Bagg was here, because I remember when David Boyle was talking about this, and Jeff Bagg said, well, we can't just make decisions based on what you say, David. We need data. Well, here's the data.
Sure. Let's bring that to his face at the next meeting.
I'm just, and I like Jeff, but I'm just saying, I remember that because David was passionate about this.
Yeah. All right. Tom Brown, what do you got? And then we're going to let Chaim have the last word.
Just a couple quick thoughts. Paul, on that issue of the 10% mark that would allow you to control, if you will, development of affordable housing. I think what that allows you to do is control a little better what it looks like. Not the intention of keeping it out, but of having a developer drop something in that would be less than desirable. So if you look at Parsons Village over on Parsons Street, 38 units, very well laid out, done by a developer. And all the restrictions and requirements of zoning, local zoning and local planning. What happens if you're not at the 10% is I believe a developer can come in and get around a lot of that stuff and build you units or development that might not look like something you really want in Easthampton. In other words, they can get away with density issues and put in a lot more units than you might normally put on a lot. Other types of things like that would allow them. So being at the 10% is critical from the ability of the community to control what goes in there, not to try to just keep it out. The other thing real quick on senior living, I know of a half a dozen Easthampton residents who have chosen to move to housing developments in Agawam, Southwick, Westfield, because they're beautiful, like Lathrop and Easthampton. They're beautifully laid out. They have all the amenities. They have socialization functions going on all the time. They've become their own little communities. And Easthampton seniors will move to those as any other seniors will. And I've spoken to people over the years about why won't you build those in Easthampton? And a lot of them come back to zoning restrictions. But you go to Westfield, there's probably a half a dozen of those. You go to Agawam, there's a half a dozen. Armbrook, places like that.
And they have attached skilled nursing facilities too, which is key.
If you build it, they will come.
It's a good point about zoning. That's something that we can, the zoning's another thing that has been coming up for ages that we could keep pressing.
Yeah, Judy even raised that in her report.
Yeah, she did. Chaim, what do you got? Close us out, would you? Take it home.
Yeah, so I definitely just wanted to reaffirm. I definitely think like framing things in terms of the housing continuum, like Paul was saying, like we do need places for people who are aging to go. Like there's a problem with people who are overhoused, like an elderly couple living in a house that has 3 or 4 bedrooms. That it's that is keeping families out of Easthampton. But I also just wanted to add clarity around the subsidized housing inventory, because I do think it's accurate to say it's not necessarily a direct measure of a community's affordability, but I would say that it is a direct measure of legally restricted affordable units, which is a class of units which is really important to our housing inventory. So like when we're talking about housing subsidies or a subsidized housing inventory, we're talking about units that were created using tax credits. So our government is subsidizing these things using the main tax credit is the low income housing tax credit, LIHTC, which is what all the developers have to use to build the public-private housing. So that I think that's just important to clarify. And on top of that, the AMI in Easthampton is pinned to the Springfield metropolitan area HUD like county, I guess you could call it, or like subdivision of the state. And it is one of the lowest in the valley, but that's like a thing that's set by like the federal agency. So it's like a bigger fish to fry kind of thing. But other than that, like I really, I think that all that data in the information that you laid out, especially just the narrative and like the way that it was all laid out, is a really powerful way to frame that information and can help, I think, bring people who might otherwise be on the fence about housing development, maybe, because I think that the policy solution for over 55 housing developments is definitely something that needs to be looked into more.
Yeah, you both have brought, everybody's brought something really valuable to this. Thank you for that extraordinary level of work and detail, Paul. I'm very grateful for it. And thank you, Chaim, for reminding me of the phrase, the housing continuum, because I can picture it and then I forget that there's a word to describe that. And I feel like this is my professional brain at work here, but the ways that we end up talking about this topic are ways that the rest of the citizenry that doesn't spend a ton of time thinking deeply about this kind of topic, they don't have access to these kinds of concepts readily. They don't have access to the full context of why we have the definition of affordable that we have. Whose fault is that? And how do we determine what restrictions exist on land development in the first place? And I think that there's an element of EDIC's work that probably in coordination with the Housing Coalition and probably in coordination with the Planning Department and probably I would like to believe with the Planning Board, a public education component about, guys, this is housing. We had something so similar to that a few years ago that was not specific to housing. It was more about, we had like, it's like open government training and anybody could go and learn about how open government works. That was cool. We should do something about housing that has a series of things that people can access from their homes in front of their computers at the high school, at the new school. Let's learn about housing. Let's do tours of housing developments that have proven to be useful to Easthampton. I think that's I'm excited about that idea. So I'm going to throw that on a future agenda. But I think that this level of detailed conversation has been exciting. Well, as I said, deeply stressful. Wow. The housing continuum continues to be a real bugaboo.
I tell you, I'm stressed out just looking at all this stuff. It drives me nuts.
Yeah, it's coming through. It's coming through.
I got real anxiety here.
I want you to take a lot of naps and
You
just
can send
really
that to us.
Yeah, I'll
Sorry.
send it to you for sure.
Email it to us. I could really use a couple of those pieces.
Yeah. All right, everyone. I think we're done for the day. For the month, in fact, for the year.
For the
Even
year.
Yeah. Happy flippin' New Year. So, Kayam, thank you for joining us. I look forward to inviting you to future things. Come even if you're not invited. You know, if you're free on Tuesdays at 4:00, great, drop by. Who would like to move that we get out of here? Mo would. Any second?
Second.
Great. All in favor of closing this meeting?
Hi.
Aye. Okay. Thank you so much. Cassie, thank you for minutes taking. Have a wonderful couple of weeks. For those who celebrate, may it be peaceful and joyful.
This government meeting is brought to you by Eastworks and our local cable subscribers.